My name is Selene Carter, I am 28 years old, and I live in a small rented apartment in New York City. At the moment, I work part-time at a coffee shop while preparing to transition into the tech world, a dream I have carried quietly for years. I met Felix Morgan, the man who would change my life, back in college. He was 3 years older than me, calm, patient, and always ready to sit beside me during the long nights when my mother was fighting her illness. Felix was the kind of person who made the world feel less frightening simply by standing next to you. After we graduated, we moved into a modest but warm apartment, where every morning felt gentle and every evening felt safe. And when I found out I was pregnant, happiness filled every corner of our tiny home. Back then, I believed our future could only grow brighter. I didn't know that just a few days after our wedding, everything would change forever. Those months before everything changed were the softest months of my life. Every morning, Felix and I woke up in our tiny New York apartment, sunlight slipping through the blinds and landing gently on the wooden floor. We would make breakfast together, usually scrambled eggs and toast, because neither of us was a good cook, but it didn't matter. We laughed our way through every burnt slice of bread. After work, we often walked through Central Park hand in hand, talking about small things, books we wanted to read, places we hoped to visit, names we liked for the baby. Felix always slowed his steps when he saw I was tired, even when I insisted I was fine. In the evenings, we sat on the couch with our legs touching while he read his favorite mystery novels and I searched for baby clothes online. Sometimes he put his book down and rested his hand on my belly. He would whisper, "Little one, we're waiting for you," and I swear I could feel our daughter kick in response. Felix believed she could hear him even before the doctors said she could. He also had a habit I loved more than anything, leaving tiny notes on the refrigerator. Messages like, "You're stronger than you think," or "Thank you for choosing me." I kept every single one inside a small wooden box next to our bed. Our life wasn't glamorous. We didn't travel much, we didn't spend much, and we didn't expect much, except love. Everything felt stable, warm, and beautifully ordinary. I truly believed our future was waiting for us like an open road. And just a week before the wedding, Felix held my hands and promised, "When the baby comes, I'll take you both to the ocean. That will be our first family trip." I didn't know then that it was a promise he would never get the chance to keep. I still remember the night everything changed. It was raining heavily, the kind of rain that makes New York feel colder than it should. I was resting on the couch, one hand on my swollen belly, when my phone rang. I expected it to be Felix telling me he would be home late. Instead, it was a voice I didn't recognize. "Are you Selene Carter? There's been an accident. Your husband. You should come to St. Mary's Hospital immediately." I froze. The room seemed to tilt. My first reaction was denial. Felix always walked carefully in the rain. He was always gentle, slow, thoughtful. There was no way this could be about him. But when I arrived at the hospital, everything became painfully real. Doctors and nurses moved around me, speaking softly, carefully. Their eyes said what their words tried to soften. Felix was gone. Just like that. I stood in the hallway, holding my belly, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. 6 months pregnant. Newly married. And suddenly, widowed. I kept waiting for someone to wake me up, to tell me it was all a nightmare. But the cold metal chairs, the smell of antiseptic, the silence of the room, they were all real. Terrifyingly real. When I called my father for help, hoping for even a tiny bit of comfort, he answered with anger instead of compassion. "I warned you," he said. "You married the wrong man. Now deal with the consequences." He hung up before I could even speak. That was the moment I realized I had no one left. No parents. No husband. No savings. Felix had always wanted to surprise me with a proper honeymoon, so he spent most of our money on the wedding, the apartment deposit, and baby preparations. After his funeral, I was left with almost nothing except a few clothes, his old watch, and our wedding rings. Aria was born 3 months later, on a day when I had only $27 in my pocket. I remember staring at the empty formula can at midnight, tears running down my face, praying for a miracle. When it didn't come, I walked to a pawn shop and sold my wedding ring, the last thing that connected me to Felix. I cried the entire way home, clutching the small can of formula to my chest. That night, I held tiny Aria in my arms, feeling her warm breath against my skin. The world had taken almost everything from me. But as I looked at her, fragile and perfect, I made myself a promise. It's just you and me now. And I will never give up on us. Not ever. 3 years passed, and Aria grew into a quiet, gentle child with bright eyes and a soft smile. But there was one thing missing: her voice. She never said mama, never babbled, never formed even the simplest sound. At first, I convinced myself it was normal. Every child grew differently. Some talked later than others. But deep down, the fear grew heavier inside me. One morning, after Aria turned 3, I took her to a neurologist in Manhattan. The room smelled of disinfectant and old files. Aria sat on my lap, playing with the zipper of my jacket. The doctor reviewed the scans, his face composed but solemn. Then he looked at me. "Miss Carter, Aria has signs of early brain injury. Her chances of developing speech on her own are very low." The words didn't hit me all at once. They sank slowly, like stones dropping into deep water. I stared at him, trying to process what I had just heard. "Are you saying she might never speak?" My voice trembled. He nodded gently. "She will need long-term therapy. It will be a difficult journey." When we left the clinic, the city noises felt distant, muffled, as if I had stepped inside a world made of glass. I held Aria's small hand while my heart cracked open. I thought losing Felix was the worst thing that could happen to me. But realizing my daughter might never speak, realizing she had been struggling silently for years, felt like my world was breaking apart all over again. That evening, while feeding Aria dinner, she smiled at me. So pure. So trusting. And in that moment, a wave of guilt crashed over me. What if I had noticed earlier? What if I had been smarter, quicker, better? Was I failing her the same way life had failed me? I put her to bed and quietly closed the door. Then I walked into the bathroom, locked it, and slid down onto the cold tile floor. For the first time in years, I let myself cry, really cry. I pressed my hands against my mouth to silence the sobs, terrified that Aria might hear me. I didn't want her to see her mother breaking. I didn't want her to feel responsible for my pain. But in that hidden, shaking moment, I understood something bitter and true. No one was coming to save us. Felix was gone. My father didn't care. And the world, no matter how kind it seemed on the outside, wasn't going to lift me out of this. If I wanted Aria to have a future, I had to become the strongest version of myself. Not tomorrow. Not someday. Right now. And that realization, cold, painful, undeniable, was the true breaking point of my life. I moved to a cheaper apartment on the outskirts of the city, a place where the walls were thin and the nights were always colder. I started working night shifts at a hotel, pushing a cleaning cart down long, silent hallways while the world slept. At 2 a.m., my body felt heavy, and my eyelids burned, but I kept going because I had no other choice. Every morning, after finishing my shift, I took the subway home and picked up Aria from the neighbor who watched her for a few hours. I barely slept. My days were filled with doctor visits, speech therapy attempts, and moments when Aria stared at me with her big, quiet eyes as if asking questions she couldn't say out loud. There were nights when exhaustion crushed me so completely that I sat on the kitchen floor, too tired to stand, too scared to dream. A part of me wondered if I had failed as a wife, failed as a mother, failed as a daughter. I carried guilt like a shadow. One evening, my best friend Leora called me after seeing how drained I looked. She said something that stayed with me. "Strength isn't loud, Selene. Sometimes strength is just choosing to wake up again." Her words felt like a hand reaching into the darkness, pulling me forward. I started writing my feelings in a small notebook, short notes about my fears, my hopes, and the small victories that no one else saw. Slowly, I realized that my pain didn't mean I was broken. It meant I was growing. Every sleepless night, every silent tear, every moment I wanted to quit but didn't, those were signs that I was still fighting. And somewhere inside that quiet struggle, hope began to flicker again. I began my recovery on a cold December night, when the city lights of New York felt too bright for the life I was living. It started simply. I signed up for a free online programming course. I didn't know anything about coding, but I knew I needed a path out of exhaustion, fear, and survival mode. I needed something that could change my future and areas. My days blended into each other. I worked the night shift at the hotel, pushing my cleaning cart down long, quiet hallways until 2 or 3 a.m. I would catch the subway home, half asleep, and arrive just in time to prepare breakfast for Aria. After feeding her, giving her therapy exercises, and trying to keep her entertained, I would open my old laptop and watch programming lessons with headphones on so she wouldn't hear the noisy explanations or glitchy audio. I learned variables with a toddler climbing on my lap. I debugged code with one hand while holding Aria's bottle in the other. Most nights, I slept less than 3 hours. My vision blurred constantly. Some days, I felt too numb to think. But every time I wanted to quit, I reminded myself of Aria's small fingers wrapped around mine. That was enough. My best friend Leora became my lifeline. Twice a week, she came over to watch Aria so I could attend virtual classes more seriously. Sometimes she cooked for us. Sometimes she just sat in silence beside me while I typed. She never said it out loud, but I knew she believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. After 6 months of relentless effort, I completed the course. I applied everywhere: big companies, tiny startups, places I had never heard of. Most rejected me. Some didn't respond. But one small software company sent an email asking if I would like to interview for an internship. I cried in the bathroom of the hotel when I read it. The internship turned into a junior position. The junior role became a full-time job. Then, slowly, I climbed to mid-level developer, then lead developer. Every promotion felt unreal, as if I were living someone else's life. Eventually, I bought a tiny house on the edge of Queens. An old car. And most importantly, I enrolled Aria in a specialized school where teachers understood her needs and celebrated every little step she took. One evening, while I was repairing her broken toy piano, she suddenly touched my arm and whispered a sound so small I almost thought I imagined it. "Ma." I froze. Then I cried, louder than I ever had, because after years of silence, my daughter had finally reached for me with her voice. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a full word. But to me, it was a miracle. And in that moment, I knew. Every sacrifice had been worth it. I stood by the window of our small but warm new home, watching the afternoon light fall gently across the floor. Aria sat on the rug behind me, quietly stacking her wooden blocks, her little fingers steady and determined. Her world was slow, careful, and full of silent victories. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Looking at her, I began to reflect on everything we had survived. My journey wasn't a simple line. It was a circle of love, loss, fear, exhaustion, and finally, growth. I thought about Felix, about the nights I cried alone, about the mornings when I didn't know how to keep going. I remembered the hospital rooms, the cold hallways, the rejection from my father, the exhaustion of working nights, the trembling in my hands when I studied code at 4 in the morning. And then, slowly, the story changed. The first job interview, the first paycheck, the first time Aria smiled and looked straight into my eyes as if she understood everything I had fought for. My voice trembled as I whispered to myself, "Pain doesn't destroy you. It shapes you into the person you were meant to be." Aria looked up at me suddenly, her eyes bright, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak again. I didn't expect a sound. I didn't need one. Her presence alone was enough. But that moment reminded me of something important. Strength isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just choosing to try again, even when you're tired. Sometimes it's believing in a future you cannot see yet. So I ask you, if you were in my place, would you keep fighting, or would you give up? Before the scene fades out, I turn back to the window and end the story with a final message. Share your thoughts, and subscribe for more emotional English stories to improve your listening skills. Your journey matters. Every step, every struggle, every small victory.